is here to talk about some of the common and complex issues. Is Dan Doyle, co-founder of the Institute for International Sport and author of the new book, The Encyclopedia of Sports Parenting. Dan, thanks for being here.
Thanks.
And you need an encyclopedia. I know personally it's definitely a challenge being a parent of young athletes. And I'm not talking about world-class athletes, kids playing sports. So let's talk about some of the kind of the overriding issues that you've seen that's kind of inspired you to write this book.
Well, one of the most interesting surveys, we surveyed over 9,000 people for the book, Brad. We spent about 7.5 years writing it. And one of the most important surveys was with a group of very accomplished professionals. We surveyed 17 U.S. senators, 9 governors, a former U.S. vice president, over 200 CEOs. We surveyed 500 people in total. 86% of them told us they had played sport in their youth. Of that group, 98% told us that the experience had been worthwhile. But only 7 had been college captains, only 29 had been high school captains. Most of them were pretty average athletes who drew other lessons. Teamwork was a big one. This notion that I put in the book of what I call competitive self-restraint, that ability to compete but maintain one's self-control, came out time and again. And the other one that came out that I think is worthy for parents to consider, Brad, is this issue of learning to deal with disappointment and turning it into a resolve to do better in the future.
So I take it that those are a lot of the things, as a parent introducing their kids to sports, those are the things that ideally parents should be focusing on. Not necessarily achievement in sports, not necessarily winning every game, or getting your kid to the point where they're the one that's picked first on the sandlot, but those kinds of intrinsic rewards that can ultimately help them later in life.
That's well said, and I like the word intrinsic. One of the things I do in the book is I separate internal goals and external goals. And the external goals are those goals that relate to making the all-star team or being the leading scorer. And they're noble and they're worthy, and there's nothing wrong with the pursuit of proficiency. But those internal goals of teamwork and camaraderie and fitness and all of those things that can come from a positive sports experience, they need to be factored in heavily, particularly at the beginning.
It's interesting that you interviewed some of those fantastic leaders in a variety of fields and found that in their early life in athletics, they weren't necessarily the first person you think of as a leader on their team. They weren't elected captain, for instance. Where do you see how they got from point A to point B, if you know what I'm asking?
Well, one of the things that came out of the surveys and that I really focus on in the book, Brad, is this issue of dealing with disappointment, learning from it, and moving on. Most of the leaders we surveyed told us that they don't get stuck on disappointment. And I love, as I know you do, in fact, your wonderful family is a reflection of this, passionate kids who love what they do. But what we want to try to do as parents is steer that passion toward learning the lessons from things that don't always go our way.
It is a great thing and sometimes a difficult thing to do. One last point I want to ask you about, that relationship between the parent and the coach. And you hear these stories about parents kind of maybe pushing the envelope too far. Can you, in a nutshell, give a little bit of an idea of how to manage that relationship from a parental side?
Simple principle to follow. On matters of strategy and playing time, stay out of it. On matters of ethics, if a coach is doing something unethical, using excessive profanity, not only your right but your obligation to step in. But allow the youngster to experience that journey to self-reliance.
It's great stuff and a lot more to get to, of course. So if you're interested in the book, The Encyclopedia of Sports Parenting, go to our website, NBC30.com, and click on As Seen on NBC30. Dan, thanks for being here, and we'll be right back.